don't know me, I am normally here on Wednesdays. I'm just in the back. Me and my husband are over the young adults ministry here, so that's normally where I am on Wednesdays, but I'm super glad to be with y'all tonight. I know that throughout the summer in here we've been talking about what heaven would look like if it was here in Fair Forest, and we've touched on things like salvation and sonship and prayer and healing. And tonight we're going to be talking about faith. Tonight we're asking a simple but important question. What would our church look like if the faith that exists in heaven, was visible here in Fair Forest? And we're going to do this together by defining what faith is biblically. And then we're going to look at the story of Hagar in Genesis and see how she exhibits faith. And then we're going to ask how the same faith can become abundant in our own lives and in our church communities. I've broken our lesson down tonight into 3 main points. The first being trust the artist. God sees us. The second being trust the process. God speaks. And the final point being trust the product before it's finished. We obey. So the first point is defining faith. It's trusting the artist, seeing how God sees us. And we're going to start in Hebrews chapter 11. So if you will turn there with me. I am reading out of the CSB version, just so y'all know. And I am actually going to read the entire chapter of Hebrews 11 because I think the word speaks for itself, and it very beautifully defines what faith is and what that looks like throughout the entire Old Testament. So I'm going to start in chapter 11, verse 1. It says, "Now faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. For by it our ancestors won God's approval. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that were not visible. By faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith he was approved as a righteous man because God approved his gifts, and even though he is dead, he still speaks through faith. By faith Enoch was taken away, so he did not experience death. He was not found because God took him away. For before he was taken away, he was approved as one who pleased God. Now without faith, it is impossible to please God, since the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith, Noah, after he was warned about what was not yet seen and motivated by godly fear, built an ark to deliver his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place he was going to receive an inheritance. He went out, and even though he did not know where he was going, by faith he stayed as a foreigner in a land of promise, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, co-heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past the age, since she considered that the one who had promised was faithful. Therefore, from one man, in fact, from one as good as dead, came offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and innumerable as the grains of sand along the seashore. All of these died in faith, although they had not received the things that were promised. But they saw them from a distance, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on earth. Now those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they were thinking about where they came from, they would have had an opportunity to return. But now desire a better place, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. He received the promises, and yet he was offering his one and only son, the one whom it had been said, "Your offering will be called through Isaac." He considered God to be able to even raise someone from the dead. Therefore, he received him back, figuratively speaking. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and he worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, as he was nearing the end of his life, mentioned the exodus of the Israelites and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, after he was born, was hidden by his parents for 3 months because they saw that the child was beautiful and that they didn't fear the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. For he considered reproach for the sake of Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, since he was looking ahead to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt behind, not being afraid of the king's anger, for Moses preserved as one who sees him who is invisible. By faith, he instituted the Passover and sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch the Israelites. By faith, they crossed the Red Sea as though they were on dry land. When the Egyptians attempted to do this, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after being marched around by the Israelites for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute welcomed the spies in peace and didn't perish with those who disobeyed. And what more can I say? Time is too short for me to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, gained strength in weakness, became mighty in battle, and put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead, raised to life again. Other people were tortured, not accepting release so that they might gain a better resurrection. Others experienced mockings and scourgings, as well as bonds and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they died by the sword. They wandered around in sheepskin and goatskin, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and on mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that they would not be made perfect without us. This chapter, honestly, again, could be the whole lesson. It preaches itself. It defines faith right in the beginning, and then it closes beautifully by reminding us that we're going to spend times of our lives in deserts and mountains and hiding in caves, and we may not see the fulfillment of the promise, but that doesn't mean we should be any less faithful, and God isn't going to be any less faithful. The very first verse in Hebrews chapter 11 gives us the definition of faith. It says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." This is faith defined by the Bible. Faith is not blind optimism. Faith is confidence in God's character, not confidence in a favorable outcome. Faith and hope, we see, are related, but there is a dichotomy between them. They are different. Faith trusts who God is. Hope expects what God will do. Faith is rooted in God's character. Hope is rooted in God's promises. Faith says, I believe him. Hope says, I expect his goodness. So hope and faith, they both look forward to the future, but faith relies on God's character to expect the things that God has already promised. So when was faith first required? And the answer is, let there be light at the very start. Adam and Eve required faith the minute they were breathed into existence. Faith was necessary to trust in the goodness and authority of God's character, to believe that every word that he was saying is the truth. They had to have faith not to eat the fruit, but unfortunately, their faith failed. They relied on outcome over obedience. They thought that maybe the Lord had lied. They hoped that the outcome of all the things the Lord was providing them with was not as good as what the serpent was currently offering. So instead, they relied on misplaced hope rather than faith placed in the character of who God is. And in Genesis 3, after the fall, from that point forward, all of humanity had to trust that God was faithful to his word, that he would fulfill the promise of sending someone who would crush the serpent, that he would reconcile man to himself, and all of humanity had to have faith in who God is before they saw the fulfillment of that promise. Faith has always been a pathway by which we walk with God. Hebrews 11:6 says, "Now without faith it is impossible to please God, since the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." A few weeks ago, when Pastor Amber spoke on prayer, she underscored the illustration of prayer being a walk and prayer being an ongoing conversation with a friend, our friend being Jesus. And every time we pray, every time we speak to the Lord, we place our faith in who he is. We give him our intimate thoughts. We tell him things and show him things that we would show no other person, and that's because we trust him. We have faith in his character. We have faith in him being our healer, our confidant, our provider, our God who sees all. And prayer is not a genie in a bottle. It's not a means of asking God to see the final product of something before we start putting in investments. Rather, it's investing all that we have in who God is, regardless of how we expect the outcome to occur. And that's how all plans work, all creating works. Having plans is kind of funny, but it's kind of funny to watch plans happen from a distance. I'm sure some of you have ordered or at least tried to put together like IKEA or Amazon furniture. Yeah, maybe. Or at least watch someone try to do it. They open the box and the brackets and screws fall out. I mean, some of the brackets are shaped like punctuation marks you've never seen before in your life. And then you get to the directions and it's all in Swedish. Fun times. And if you're watching someone try to put this together, they're trying their best to follow the directions, or they might be like my dad who likes to maximize his construction time and just throw the directions away. But you're standing there thinking there's absolutely no way all this junk is going to turn into like the bookshelf printed on the front of that box. But last, after many hours of deep breaths, a couple prayers sent up, maybe even your marriage being pushed to its limits, the bookshelf stands, right? And was it easy to put together? No, actually, not at all. Halfway through, you're convinced there's no way that this becomes the picture on the box, but you keep building. Not because the pieces are making sense, but because you trust the people who designed it. And there's a reason that IKEA is in the furniture business. They have authority in the furniture business. When I order furniture from Amazon or IKEA or whatever reputable place people order furniture from, I'm not worried about the final product looking like it came from Temu. I'm not worried about opening the box and finding a bookshelf that's like this big. I trust IKEA, because they do this all the time. But IKEA's not perfect. They're going to maybe leave out the directions in a shipment, maybe leave out some screws. But unlike IKEA, our God is perfect. Our God doesn't leave out some screws in the box. Putting our faith in God should be easier than putting our faith in an online furniture order. When God says there's a package on the way, I don't worry about what's in the box because I know who made it. I know the manufacturer. I trust that what he has promised will come to fruition because I have faith in his character. I trust every piece that I will need will be provided when I need it because God sees, God speaks, and we must obey. We don't trust a painting to finish itself. We trust the artist. We don't trust the clay. We trust the sculptor. 1 Corinthians 13:12 reads, "For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. But then face to face, now I know in part, then I will know fully as I am fully known." Ironically, this is my favorite Bible verse. It's actually inscribed on the inside of my wedding ring. But this Bible verse is about us maturing as Christians, going from baby Christians. And as we spend more time with God, walk with him in prayer, give more faith to the Lord, he slowly reveals things to us. But we're not going to truly see things as God sees things until we are face to face with him. But he sees us as if we are face to face with him. He knows us as we are fully known. There's things that God knows about us that we don't even know about us because he is the artist. He's our creator. So if faith is trusting the artist when we cannot see the whole painting, if it's trusting the contractor before the whole house is finished, then Hagar's story in Genesis shows us what it looks like in practice, in real life. So we're going to move down to the next point, which is trusting the process, seeing that God not only sees us, but he speaks to us. So we're going to be reading in Genesis chapter 16, but I do want to give us a little bit of context before we jump straight into the scripture. So in Genesis, here we have Abram and Sarai. They've been promised their future offspring. They've been promised that the offspring that they will have will be numerous. It will be more than the stars in the sky, more than the sand on the seashore. And the Lord promises this to Abram. And for Abram and Sarai to believe this, it already requires faith because they are well beyond their childbearing years. So they're already kind of doubtful, but, they just got this promise. They're pretty hopeful. But years passed. Lots of waiting. The childbearing years are just drifting farther and farther away. So they decide to take things into their own hands. They try to accomplish God's promise through human efforts. And Hagar, who is Sarai's slave, kind of gets caught up in the middle of all of this. And this is where we start seeing a couple beautiful things unfold. We see that our sin is never greater than God's faithfulness to his promise, and human failure does not cancel out divine faithfulness. Because we saw in Hebrews 11, they do have that son. They do have all these numerous offspring, but there's a few hiccups along the way, and this is one of those hiccups here in Genesis chapter 16. So if you haven't already, we're going to read, or flip to chapter 16. We're going to read through it together. I'm starting in verse 1. It says, Abram's wife Sarai had not borne any children for him, but since she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar, Sarai said to Abraham, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her I can build a family. And Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife for him. This happened after Abraham had lived in the land of Canaan 10 years. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she saw that she was pregnant, her mistress became contemptible to her. Then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. May the Lord judge between you and me. Abram replied to Sarai, here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her. Then Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She replied, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. The angel of the Lord said to her, you have conceived and will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. He will settle near his relatives. So she named the Lord who spoke to her. You are El Roi, she said. In this place I have actually seen the one who sees me. That is why the well is called Beer Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. So as we read through this, I noticed kind of 3 ingredients of faith. The first we kind of already talked about, God seeing. Hagar notices that the the Lord is coming to meet her where she's at. She is in a place of desperation. She is hurting. She's suffering. For Hagar, the future is dim. There isn't much to see past her current circumstance, but Hagar still names the Lord El Roi, the God who sees me. So faith begins with knowing we are seen. And then secondly, God speaks to her. He sends an angel that gives Hagar instruction and promise. And honestly, to me, if I'm Hagar, the instruction is not making much sense. There is no way I'm going back to Sarai. He's like, if you go back to your mistress and submit to her authority, your son is blessed. All of these great things will happen. Yes, there will be hardship, but this is the plan. And so she has to have faith to return to Sarai. So faith listens before it understands everything. And then lastly, we see Hagar returns even though the future is unclear. We see that she has faith to choose obedience over the visible outcome. Because for Hagar, going back means more suffering. She doesn't see the picture at the end, but she understands that this Lord, he sees me. He sees all that I am, all that I'm going through, and he's giving me instruction. He's giving me advice, so she obeys him. And this is really the heart of the story. God is not asking us to see the whole picture right now. He's asking us to trust the one who already does see the whole picture. There's this battle between obedience and outcome, because faith is not controlling the result. Faith is surrendering the result to God. Our responsibility is obedience. God's responsibility is the outcome. So oftentimes we'll find ourselves in Hagar's shoes, or in a situation where the finished product seems unattainable or unimaginable. And that's where isolation and whispers of abandonment decide to creep in. We may find ourselves asking, maybe the Lord did lie. Maybe he has lied. Maybe there is something greater that I can make on my own. Or maybe even I can't see how the outcome of all the things the Lord has provided are as good as what the serpent is currently offering. So how can a God who tends to billions at a time see me? How could any of my life occupy a single moment of the Lord's time? And this is where I'm reminded of a God who saw someone like Hagar, who from Abram and Sarah's perspective was not even central to the plan at all. She was just a means to get what was divinely promised through human effort. She was dispensable, but the Lord saw her value. He came and met her. And there's this beautiful passage from C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity that so beautifully and articulately explains a potential answer to this internal conflict. He says, a man put it to him like this: I can believe in God all right, but what I cannot swallow is the idea of him attending to 700 million people, several hundred million people who are addressing him all at the same moment. And to that man, Lewis gives this answer. He says, almost certainly, God is not in time. His life does not consist of moments following one after another. If 1 million people are praying to him at 10:30 at night, he need not listen to them in that little snippet that we call 10:30. 10:30 in every moment from the beginning of the world is always present for him. If you like to put it that way, he has all eternity to listen to the split second of a prayer put up by a pilot as his plane crashes in flames. And that is difficult, I know. So let me give something not the same, but a little like it. Suppose I am writing a novel. I write, Mary laid down her work. Next moment came a knock at the door. For Mary, who has to live in the imaginary time of my story, there is no interval between putting down the work and hearing the knock. But I, who am Mary's maker, do not live in that imaginary time at all. Between writing the first half of the sentence and the second, I might sit down for 3 hours and think steadily about Mary. I could think about Mary as if she were the only character in the book, for as long as I am pleased, and the hours that I spent in doing so would not appear in Mary's time, the time inside the story, at all. This is not a perfect illustration, of course, but it may just give a glimpse of what I believe to be the truth. God is not hurried about the time stream of this universe any more than an author is hurried along in the imaginary time of his own novel. He has infinite attention to spare for each one of us. He does not have to deal with us in the mass. You are as much alone with him as if you were the only being he had ever created. When Christ died, he died for you individually, just as much as if you had been the only man in the world. And I think that is such a beautiful word picture that Lewis demonstrates. And all I could think about when reading this was Hagar. Like, God took moments. He was in no hurry to see what path Hagar could choose, to see what she needed, to assess where she was hurting, what she required in those moments. God saw Hagar. He saw her needs. He knew she had come from where she had come from and where she was headed, yet the angel still asked her, "Where have you come from? Where are you going?" God is not hurried as we are. He has eternity to write a beautiful story, withholding no good thing, letting no detail go unaddressed. What I love about Hagar's story is that it's not just an Old Testament story. The God who saw Hagar is the same God who Jesus reveals to us in the New Testament. Jesus says in Matthew 6 that your Father knows what you need before you ask him. That's verse 8. And later he tells his disciples not to worry about tomorrow because your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Verse 32. Isn't that crazy? Like, Hagar thought she was forgotten in the wilderness, yet God saw her. And centuries later, Jesus shows us the exact same thing. Jesus tells us that our Father still sees us. Before we pray, before we worry, before we even know what to ask, he already knows. And then Jesus takes it a step further in Luke. He says, not one sparrow is forgotten before God, and that even the hairs on your head are all numbered. I mean, think about that. I probably lost like 15 from like here to the car, and God knows exactly how many hairs are on my head. If God pays so much attention to the sparrows and to all the hairs on our head that fall out every day, how much more does he see all of his sons and daughters? And Hagar called him El Roi, the God who sees me. Jesus confirms that title. The God who met Hagar in the wilderness is the same Father who watches over us today. Hagar did not know how her story would end. She simply knew the God who met her in the wilderness. She simply trusted the author, trusted the creator, because God sees, God speaks, and we obey. And we've seen that we must trust the creator. He has all the knowledge, all the provision that we could ever need, and God sees our needs. We've seen that we must trust the process. God speaks, he acts. And the last part is up to us. We obey. And as we kind of shift, as we move from Hagar's wilderness to how this applies to our own church body, I'll ask the question, if heaven looked down on Fair Forest this week, what evidence of faith would it see? Would heaven see people serving before they're noticed, having obedience without applause? Would heaven see people loving before they're loved back, trusting God with all relationships? Would heaven see people giving before they felt secure, having faith in the provider? Would heaven see people praying before they see any answers, trusting the God who sees? Faith in Fair Forest looks like people staying faithful when the process is still confusing. It looks like madness before it makes sense. I said this multiple times while painting the mural in the children's church, because the beginning of that painting looked like alien communication on the wall. And people would come in, their eyes would get really big, and I'd be like, don't worry about it. It's going to look like madness before it makes sense. And when I was in high school, my art teacher always told us that all artwork is an ugly duckling before it can be a swan. And I'd be at my desk, and I would be looking at the most pitiful, like, disgusting glob of paint, feeling so defeated, not seeing how any of it would be salvageable. And she would come up behind me and she would say, "Don't worry about it. It's just an ugly duckling." And she did this as a way to keep us from judging our work before it was finished. Because if we did judge our work before finishing, we might make adjustments that weren't needed. We might try to solve problems that would eventually resolve themselves, or even change things that would ruin the beauty of the artwork that was originally planned. At the time, I didn't think she was crazy. I thought she was blind. Because some of my classmates would be creating things that looked like they should be handled with PPE or hazmat suits. And she would tell them, "Don't worry about it. It's just an ugly duckling." And I would think to myself, that is not an ugly duckling. That is primordial goop. That will not evolve into anything that remotely resembles a bird. But she always trusted the process, and those students always ended up creating things that I could not even imagine, and I would find myself even envious of the things that they created, but they started out as primordial goop. But she always trusted the process without ever knowing what the outcome would be. And as I grow older, I find myself analyzing aspects of shortcomings in my life, or moments where things are really hard through this lens. Things go wrong, and I look to the Lord, and I just know that it's an ugly duckling, Because I know the artist. I don't have to fear the unfinished painting, because I know eventually that ugly duckling is going to turn into the swan that he's always promised. And the church is the same. The church is still being formed, but the hands shaping it belong to God. Fair Forest has so many promises and prophecies spoken over her. It's hard to believe that they'll still come to fruition sometimes, especially when attendance is low, or when the live stream doesn't work, or when sickness seems to be spreading like wildfire, or the prodigals don't seem to be coming home. It's hard not to ask, did God lie? But it's just an ugly duckling. We have so much evidence of the goodness of God. Every sentence in Hebrews 11 is a testimony to the character of God. How can we withhold any of our faith from him, seeing how much he's already provided? He's not IKEA. He's not going to leave a screw out of the box. He will provide what we need when we need it. All he asks us to do is obey. He asks for our obedience. When he does provide what we need, let's use it. Let's steward it. In the waiting, let us not be like Abram, who tried to fulfill a divine promise through human efforts. Abram had 14 more years after Ishmael before Isaac came. His promise still came, but his lack of faith in the process and his doubt in the product led to disobedience and hardship that could have been avoided. But it was all part of the plan. Let us be more like Hagar, who recognizes her hardship, but knows that the Creator sees her, speaks to her, and therefore she obeys him. When he tells her to return, she returns. Faith is not pretending everything is easy. Faith is trusting God's character enough to obey him before we can see the outcome. Hagar discovered that God sees us in the wilderness, speaks to us in uncertainty, and remains faithful despite our human failures. When our faith does fail, because it will, because we'll get tired of looking at the ugly duckling and we'll try our best to force it to become a swan, the Lord is still faithful to us. Every single person who was exemplified for their faith in Hebrews 11 had moments where their faith had failed. But yet, God still saw them. He still saw their faithfulness. God sees us in full as we're face to face with him. So what would faith in Fair Forest as it is in heaven look like practically? It would look like a church that trusts the artist, obeys before the outcome is visible. If the Lord has told you your prodigal's coming home, your prodigal's coming home. If the Lord has told you that you'll be healed, healing is coming, right? The Lord has spoken revival over Fair Forest. Revival is coming. There is so much to expect, not because we're hoping for something good, but because we have faith in who God is. We don't know what the picture is going to look like. It won't look like any picture we can paint. But faith in Fair Forest, as it is in heaven, looks like believing in the unfinished work of God. It looks like believing that that unfinished work will become something beautiful because the one holding the brush is good. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. That's Hebrews 11:3. And I think that's so beautiful that God takes what is not seen and makes something new. So even though what we see is maybe not even a part of the plan, sometimes there's pieces in motion that we can't see. Most of the time, it is pieces in motion we can't see. And God is working behind the scenes. He's working in ways that we can't even begin to imagine or fathom. So I encourage you, if you feel like you're in the wilderness, if you feel like you are Hagar, I encourage you to love the ugly duckling. And when the Lord says it's time to move, when it's time to become a swan, when it's time to start using and stewarding the things that he's going to start placing into your life, that there's obedience there, because God sees, God speaks, and we obey. So I ask, where is God asking you to trust the artist, the creator? Where is he asking you to obey before you understand? And what would happen if every single member of Fair Forest answered that question with, yes, Lord, I'm here.